How does The Lord of the Rings end? Spectacularly. Hi, I'm Dave. Welcome to High Lowbrow, because culture matters and it's okay to want to have fun. So I finished my read-through of The Lord of the Rings, effectively, more or less, read The Return of the King, and I want to talk about why the ending is so great, why the ending is so satisfying of this book. And if you have not read the book, if you've only seen the movies, I think I'm going to tell you some things about the book that you probably couldn't even guess. Because the thing that really struck me in finishing this book, reading it for the first time in 20 years, and as I finished the book, the thing that really struck me was how many stories Tolkien is weaving together and bringing to a satisfying end, right? How many different tales, subplots, you'd call them in like a writer's symposium, Tolkien brings to a conclusion. Not that everybody dies, right? It's not nothing changes after this point, but virtue is rewarded, vice is punished, and the action we have been following, the questions we have been wanting to have answered, get answered in a satisfying way. So I'm just going to talk about maybe as many as half a dozen of the little stories that Tolkien is telling that wind up at the end of Return of the King. And my temptation is to read. I'm going to do a fair amount of reading, but I'll try to sort of force myself to stay off the page and just tell you the story. So for this first story, in fact, I won't even look at the book. One of the great examples of the sort of ends is the scouring of the Shire. So in the book, of course, after the war ends and Aragorn is crowned and married, the hobbits go home. They stop at Rivendell on the way about the time of Bilbo's and Frodo's birthday, and then they go back to the Shire as we're turning into winter. And it turns out the Shire is a mess. Why is the Shire a mess? Well, several stories that we've been following, in some cases all the way from The Hobbit, actually, have intersected in the Shire. Now, by the way, there is a kind of a mythology or architecture of stories reason why the Shire is a mess, right? And that is as follows. This is a little sort of technical, theoretical, but bear with me. The Shire is a mess for the same reason for which Ithaca is a mess when Odysseus comes home and he has to reconnect with Penelope and of course Telemachus, his son, and drive the suitors out, right? And it's a basic sort of storytelling reason, and that is the hero leaves home, right? In Joseph Campbell's paradigm and Here with a Thousand Faces, there's the village, there's something wrong with the village, there's a threat to the village, and for the village to be saved, the hero has to leave the village and cross over the wall from settled land into the land of monsters, where he has to have a road of trials and do battle with monsters, suffer wounds, gain insight and wisdom, and then he has to come back and save the village, right? So that's sort of the technical, the theoretical, the mythological reason for which we have to have the scouring of the Shire. But also, we're tying up some stories, some important stories. One of the stories is Lotho Baggins. Okay, who Lotho and Lobelia, his mother, have bought for a steal, Bag End, after coveting it for decades. Right, Bilbo lived unnaturally long. They kept thinking they'd inherit, so they finally buy Bag End. What do they do with it? Well, during the year when Frodo and the younger hobbits have been away, Lotho has been basically taking over the Shire. He's backed by Saruman's money, and he's buying up businesses and ripping up trees and taking over the government, and he's enforcing sort of puritanical laws on the hobbits. I mean, one of the delightful things is he's restricted the ability to, like, I think the inns don't serve beer anymore, and people aren't allowed to smoke. right? This is sort of Tolkien's vices. And he's become this little despot over the course of the year. The Hobbits have been gone like a year and a quarter, something like that, a year and a bit when they get back. And Saruman's gold's been behind that, but of course, in the end, in recent weeks, so when the hobbits are going home, they pass Saruman on the road. Then they go to Rivendell and they stay for a while. And what happens is Saruman and Grima Wormtongue with him go to the Shire. Right now, the damage was already done. It's over the course of the year. Lotho's been taking over, backed by Saruman, whose nickname is Sharky, which according to a Tolkien footnote is derived from an orc slang word, or it's a slang word derived from an orc word meaning old man. Okay, so now Saruman's in the Shire, and Grima Wormtongue is with him, and we get an ending of these subplots where the hobbits who return in mail and mounted on ponies, right? They left on foot and hiding and carrying knapsacks. They come back as knights, and basically any sheriffs or door wardens who resist them, they just drive off and kind of laugh at, right? Including the various men. In fact, one of just the very tiny little threads, the stories that threads through here. I'm telling a story within a story like Scheherazade, is the story of Bill Ferny and the Pony Bill, because the hobbits buy an ill-fed, mistreated pony named, or from a man named Bill Ferny, who seems to be a Saruman associate in Bree. They feed the pony well. The pony thrives as they're journeying to down to Moria. They don't take the pony into Moria. They let the pony go. Sam is terribly afraid the pony's going to get eaten by the thing in the water or by the wolves he hears howling. But in fact, the pony makes its way back to Rivendell, or not Rivendell, makes its way back to Bree. And is waiting for them when they return to the Prancing Pony, Barlam and Butterbur's Inn, right? And they take Bill the pony, because they've paid for him, who's now a healthy, sleek, happy pony, back to the Shire, where who should they meet but Bill Ferny, who is, I think he's guarding the gate into Buckland. And when the hobbits basically handily dispense with him, because they're heroic now, right? They're, notwithstanding he's a human and bigger than they are, they're armed, they know how to use their weapons, they've learned this. They scare Bill Ferny off, and as Bill Ferny is running, the Pony Bill kicks its old master who mistreated, right? So it's just this tiny little story. The mistreated pony survives his own road of trials and returns and sets things right in the pony's little village by kicking his old abusive master. Anyway, how does the scouring of the Shire go? Well, Lotho has set these things in motion, and they are bigger than him, and he wasn't really, he was stupid. He wasn't this malicious, and he basically, the hobbits have to go and rescue him. He's held prisoner in Bag End. There's a battle. There's some 100 human thugs that are enforcing Saruman's will on the Shire at this point. There's a battle. Because the hobbits now have military experience, they set up an ambush, they lure the men in, and then the road is blocked off with wagons, and they have hidden archers, and they suffer casualties, but they make short work of them. And then there's a final confrontation with Grima and Saruman. And it's short, it's brutal. Saruman tries to stab, I think it might be Frodo. It's one of the hobbits. He in spite, utterly defeated. He's lost his magical power. His flattery doesn't work anymore. The hobbits are throwing him out of the Shire, and he stabs, I think it's Frodo, but one of the hobbits. But the hobbit is wearing mail. The stabbing has no effect. He then sneers at Grima Wormtongue, and Wormtongue in response slits Saruman's throat, and then runs. And the hobbit warriors, fresh off their victories against the thugs, shoot him with arrows, and he dies, right? So this is just a little example of the we see the end of the story of Saruman, right? And Saruman was one of the Astari, one of the 5 wizards, but he tried to aggrandize himself. He tried to bring himself to power through treachery and deceit, and ultimately he himself is betrayed by his own creature and dies murdered, right? So anyway, I'm gonna talk through, I think, maybe 5 little plots, and just the point here is that the complexity of the Lord of the Rings, the overall weave, gives it its heft, its substance. We have many stories ending here, not just the story of the ring. And some of the big ones I'm not even going to talk about today. We'll talk about later, about Beregond and Éowyn, for example, and about the ultimate fates of some of the hobbits. I'm going to show you some little ones. Again, some things that if you just watch the movie, you would probably be surprised to hear this is in here. So here's a real short one, just a little example. That's just the way Tolkien handles this is I think, delightful. So Pippin has reached Gondor with Gandalf, and a man named Beregond, who's in the king's service, takes him around. He teaches him the passwords, or the lesser passwords, and then Pippin is spending time with Beregond's son Beregil, and they are watching the allied captains arrives. People like Prince Imrahil of Dol Amroth is showing up with his warriors, right? Because they know the final conflict is coming, and the allies are fewer than they expect, and so this is sort of adding to the fear and the tension. There's this long list of them, but there's this one character, and we only hear about him, I think, 3 times. Here's the first one, and he makes a little plot in this little kind of very human moment. There was a loud trumpet blast, and all about them people were shouting. "Forlong, Forlong," Pippin heard men calling. "What do they say?" he asked. "Forlong has come," Beregond answered. "Old Forlong the Fat, the lord of Losarnach. That is where my grandsire lives. Hurrah! Here he is, good old Forlong." And we get a description of him. He's riding a big, thick-limbed horse. On it sat a man of wide shoulders and huge girth, but old and gray-bearded, yet mail-clad and black-helmed and bearing a long, heavy spear. And he's got only half the men they expected. This is the first we've heard of Forlong the Fat. We hear of him, I think, kind of once or twice more in the battle, and then we get his end, which is interesting because he's called Forlong the Fat several times, and then he dies. He's killed in battle, and whoops, on the wrong page. He's killed in battle, and he's cut down. I think it was by orcs, not sure. He's cut down by the enemy. Many others were hurt or maimed or dead upon the field. The axes hewed Forlong as he fought alone and unhorsed. So this guy, who's been called Forlong the Fat several times, gets knocked off his thick-limbed horse and cut down by a crowd of enemy warriors, a mob of enemy warriors with axes, right? Valiant. He dies in the thick of the battle and the sort of the great climactic day of the war. Then we get a song sung by the men of Rohan, and apparently it's only sung later, but Tolkien puts it on the same page. So long afterward, a maker in Rohan said in his song of the mounds of Mundburg, and there's this song that goes through all the different captains that have fallen. Theoden fell, Thingling mighty, in his golden to his golden halls and green pastures in the northern fields, never returning. Right, Herefara and Herubrand, Horn and Fastred fought and fell there in a far country. And here's his line about Forlong, which I think is just terrific. Neither Hirluin the fair to the hills by the sea. So these people did not return to their homes. Neither Llewyn the Fair to the hills by the sea, nor Forlong the Old to the flowering vales. By the way, the rhythm here is Beowulfian. Okay, the Rohirrim are the Old English, and they're singing in Old English meters. Nor Forlong the Old to his flowering vales. It's so interesting to me, right? Because Tolkien is an Anglo-Saxonist. He's an Old English scholar, and this is an Old English meter, and Old English poetry is heavily alliterative. And throughout this poem, you get a line: "There Theoden fell, Thengling mighty, Dunhera and Daorwine, doughty Grimbold, Herefar and Herubrand, Horn and Fastred." So it's alliterative. The first letter of words is being repeated. And then this line about Forlong, nor Forlong the Old to the flowering vales. The obvious line here should be nor Forlong the Fat, because it's the same one syllable. It scans the same, and it has alliteration. It has an F. But I'm not going to say this line made me tear up, but without saying this, what Tolkien is showing is that the poets of the Rohirrim, right, in this tiny little story within the story, how this old heavy man came out to fight in battle, and as friends they called him Forlong the Fat, and everybody called he's fat, fine, but he dies in battle, and they don't remember him as Forlong the Fat, even though that's the obvious poetic thing. They remember that he's Forlong the Old, right? It's just this little tiny moment of poetic respect in this tiny little subplot. Let me show you one of my favorite little plots, and I might even read a page because this is so good. This did not make the movie, of course. I'm not going to say the best stuff didn't make the movie. The best stuff made the movie, but a lot of stuff that didn't make the movie was pretty great. So Merry, when he's riding with the Rohirrim, he sees, first of all, these stone, they're statues, but they're like standing stones. They're old and they're rough, right? By the side of the road. At each turn in the road, there were great standing stones that had been carved in the likenesses of men. Huge and clumsy limbed, squatting, cross-legged with their stumpy arms folded on fat bellies. And their facial features are eroded away. Their proportions look weird to Merry. The writers call them pukelmen and heeded them little, right? They're just sort of old signs of the reminders of the depth of the antiquity of Middle Earth. This is an old place, and we see monuments of a world that's forgotten. Except that some 40 pages later, we meet a live pukelman, and his name is Ghân-buri-Ghân. So Merry, he does not know this yet, but he's riding with Éowyn. Éowyn has disguised herself as a man. She's calling herself Dernhelm, and so he's riding with Dernhelm, and he's awoken when somebody kicks him accidentally. And it's Elfhelm, and Elfhelm says, he says, "What's going on?" And Elfhelm says, "The Woses, the wild men of the woods, their leader is here treating with Theoden." So Merry goes to see what this looks like, and he finds a tree and Theoden sitting there under a lantern, and he sees a strange, squat shape of a man, gnarled as an old stone, and the hairs of his scanty beard straggled on his lumpy chin like dry moss. He was short-legged and fat-armed, thick and stumpy, and clad only with grass about his waist. Merry felt that he had seen him before somewhere, and suddenly he remembered the pukelmen of Dunharrow. Here is one of those old images brought to life. So this leader has come out to talk to the Rohirrim. The wild man began to speak. His voice was deep and guttural. "No, father of horsemen," he said, "we fight not, hunt only, kill Gorgoon in woods, hate orc folk. You hate Gorgoon too. We help as we can." So he's come to offer his help to Theoden. They're not going to fight in the battle, but they have other help to offer. He introduces himself. Wild men are wild, free, but not children. I am great headman, Ghân-buri-Ghân. There's actually, I've missed a trick here. He says there are more orcs than there are you. Éomer says, how do you know that? And he says, we're not children. I am great headman, Ghân-buri-Ghân. I count many things. You have a score of scores counted 10 times and 5, which is this fantastic little detail because, again, Tolkien doesn't do anything more than say that. You have a score of scores counted 10 times and 5. You have 20 times 20 times 15, right? Which is accurate. We had a count before of the Rohirrim, and there are about 6,000 of them. That's the number he's counting, right? But what he's telling us is that, what Tolkien is telling us is that Ghân-buri-Ghân and his people, the wild Woses, the wild men of the woods, have a base 20 number system, right? Like the Celts anciently did. Alas, he speaks all too shrewdly, said Theoden. In other words, your count is correct. Let Ghân-buri-Ghân finish, said the wild man. More than one road he knows. He will lead you by road where no pits are, no Gorgoon walk. This is their word for orcs. Only wild men and beasts. And he tells them that there's a road that the Dunedain lords of Gondor made in the past that's been abandoned, that's overgrown, and his people will take them by this road, so it avoids the large army of orcs that is otherwise waiting for them, right? So, again, the point is all the little stories that are woven in here. This story comes to an end after Theoden is dead, and Aragorn is riding north, escorting the hobbits to sort of the borders of his kingdom. And we have this, just 2 paragraphs. Without haste and at peace they passed into Anorion, and they came to the grey wood under Amon-Din, and there they heard a sound as of drums beating in the hills, though no living thing could be seen. Then Aragorn let the trumpets be blown, and heralds cried, Behold, the King Elessar is come. That's Aragorn's throne name. He's the Elfstone. The forest of Druadan he gives to Ghân-buri-Ghân. And the Druadan is the Druadain are another name for the wild men of the woods, or the wood Woses. The forest of Druadan he gives to Ghân-buri-Ghân and to his folk to be their own forever, and hereafter let no man enter into it without their leave. Then the drums rolled loudly and were silent. So Ghân-buri-Ghân's only in one scene, and it really is only this kind of 3 scenes together make the arc, right? But there's a story of this whole people that is recessive. They maybe used to dominate larger chunks of the continent, but now they're just in this little forest, and for their service in the war, Aragorn grants them, their protection, their freedom. Which, by the way, this is a very real world kind of thing. I was yesterday watching a thing about a population called the Ladins, Lidins, who occupy a few valleys in the Dolomite Mountains in northeastern Italy, who genetically seem to be descendants of the pre-Indo-European population. So that when the Yamnaya culture showed up with their horses and sort of took over all the lowlands of Europe, these were people who were there already, and they just went up into their high valleys and stayed. And they're genetically distinct from Italians, in fact, from most of Europeans, and they have been fighting to preserve a language that is Romance language, but has a lot of old pre-Indo-European words still in it, right? So like populations like those of Ghân-buri, like that of Ghân-buri-Ghân, the Wood Woses, this is a real phenomenon. They exist in the real world. They exist today. All right, I got three more, and you know what? I'll just tell you one without reading. So Beregond, I mentioned this guy. Beregond is a servant of Denethor. When Gandalf and Pippin arrive in Minas Tirith, Beregond is assigned. So Gandalf and Pippin meet Denethor, the steward, initially, and Pippin sort of impulsively offers his service to Denethor, and Denethor accepts it. And Denethor says, well, I'm going to have, my men will teach you the passwords and show you where you're going to stay and get you stabled. And Beregond is the guy who does that. And so he takes he takes Pippin around for the morning in Minas Tirith. Beregond is also the guy, we'll talk about Faramir in a minute, who, when Denethor, spoiler, wants to murder his son, wants to put him on a pyre and burn himself and his son to death. Pippin runs to get help, and the first person he gets is Beregond, and Beregond rushes to the citadel. We don't see this. What we see is when Pippin makes it back, he sees the door open and the porter is dead. And then he goes inside, and Denethor is trying to command his other servants he soaked himself and his son Faramir in oil, and he's commanding the others, because he's given into the despair of Saruman. A whole other plot we could talk about, we'll touch on a little bit, is Denethor and his despair and suicide. But he wants his servants to light Faramir on fire, and Beregond is standing there stopping them. Like he's killed a man. He's killed one of his fellow servants to get in here. Actually, he's killed two others. So he's killed like 3 men to do this, and he holds them off long enough for Gandalf to come in, and then and Faramir is saved. Denethor gets himself lit on fire and burns to death. Beregond never wanted to kill these other men. We get a statement of his grief. At length they came to the steward's door, and Beregond looked with grief at the porter, the first man he killed to save Faramir. This deed I shall ever rue, he said, but a madness of haste was on me. And he would not listen, but drew sword against me. Right? Beregond didn't start the fight. This guy drew a sword to stop him from saving Faramir. So the subplot comes to an end when Aragorn is crowned and addresses. He was not there for any of this stuff, but he's king and has to deal with this crime. Beregond's killed 3 men. So Aragorn is sort of setting things in order. People are brought before him to receive praise and reward for valor, or to be judged for crimes. Last, the captain of the guard brought to him Beregond to be judged. And the king said to Beregond, by your sword blood was spilled in the Hallows. This is the sort of holy ground where the kings and then the stewards of Gondor are entombed. Also, you left your post without leave. For these things of old, death was the penalty. Now, therefore, I must pronounce your doom. All penalty is remitted for your valor in battle, and still more because all that you did was for the love of the Lord Faramir. Nonetheless, you must leave the guard of the citadel, and you must go forth from the city of Minas Tirith. The blood left Beregond's face. He was stricken to the heart and bowed his head. But Aragorn's not done. So must it be, for you are appointed to the White Company, the guard of Faramir, Prince of Ithilien, and you shall be its captain and dwell in Emin Arnon in honor and peace, and in the service of him for whom you risked all to save him from death. Classic. The guy risks everything. He commits crimes, but he does that out of a higher loyalty, and he has to accept the punishment, but it's in order to give him a greater reward. Fantastic. So I want to get through really kind of one, but also kind of two last stories, and I'm probably going to feel compelled to do some reading here too. Again, the point is, man, I just forgot how complex this book is and how many big stories, the love of Arwen and Domiel and Aragorn, son of Arathorn, right? The ambition of Saruman, but also how many tiny stories, the loyalty of Beregond, right? The fidelity of Forlong and the respect that his friends had for him, right? Are woven into the end. So, Éowyn is the niece of King Theoden. We see her first in Meduseld, King Theoden's hall. Aragorn, Gandalf, Legolas, and Gimli are there. Her first appearance literally is beside Theoden's chair stood a woman clad in white. That's it. She comes forward over a few pages. Gandalf rousts Theoden out of the torpor and the enchantment that hold him back. She comes forward, and I won't read it, but there's a lengthy paragraph talking about her and describing her as strong and beautiful and wise and sort of exuding sensations of power, and Aragorn notices her, right? This is important because she is of a class of people to be noticed by him, right? It's important also because she wants to be noticed by him, because what happens is Éowyn falls in love, and there's a wonderful, I am going to read this part. There's a wonderful discussion. Aragorn, she's at Dunharrow, leading and protecting a bunch of the civilians of her people. And Aragorn is there, but he's going to continue on in the morning, and he's going to go through the paths of the dead, which are caves, tombs, and they're haunted. And people don't go in there casually because people don't come out alive, okay? And Éowyn tries to tell him this, and he rebuffs her. He says, nevertheless, I shall take the paths of the dead alone if needs be, even though she's saying this is madness. And I love this dialogue. I love the dialogue because I'm going to read it. It's so much more complex than Tolkien's ever given credit for. Aragorn, she said, why will you go on this deadly road? Because I must, he said. Only so can I see any hope of doing my part in the war against Sauron. I do not choose paths of peril, Éowyn. Were I to go where my heart dwells, far in the north, I would now be wandering in the fair valley of Rivendell. What's he talking about? He's in love with another woman, right? He knows Éowyn's attracted to him. He doesn't say that, but he wants to sort of gently tell her this. If I could go where my heart dwells, it's in Rivendell, far away from here. She gets it. For a while she was silent, as if pondering what this might mean. Then suddenly she laid her hand on his arm. You are a stern lord and resolute, she said, and thus do men win renown. She approves. She paused. Lord, she said, if you must go, then let me ride in your following, for I am weary of skulking in the hills and wish to face peril and battle. Your duty is with your people, he answered. Too often have I heard of duty, she cried, but am I not of the house of Eorl, a shield maiden and not a dry nurse? I have waited on faltering feet long enough, since they falter no longer, it seems. May I not now spend my life as I will? She wants to go to war. Few may do that with honor, he answered. But as for you, lady, did you not accept the charge to govern the people until their lord's return? If you had not been chosen, then some marshal or captain would have been set in the same place, and he could not ride away from his charge, were he weary of it or no. In other words, you are doing a thing that has to be done by someone, and you are freeing up, if it was not you, some experienced captain, some mighty warrior would be doing this job. So you are effectively sending a mighty warrior to war in your place. You've been chosen to do this. Shall I always be chosen, she said bitterly. Shall I always be left behind when the riders depart to mind the house while they win renown and find food and beds when they return? A time may come soon, said he, when none will return. Then there will be need of valor without renown, for none shall remember the deeds that are done in the last defense of your homes. Right? This is a people, we've already seen this here just in this conversation. This is a people that sings songs about war, right? But his point is, there will be no glamour in the last defense. None will remember it. Yet the deeds will not be less valiant because they are unpraised. And she answered, and all your words are but to say, you are a woman, and your part is in the house. But when the men have died in battle and honor, you have leave to be burned in the house, for the men will need it no more. But I am of the house of Éowyn and not a serving woman. I can ride and wield blade, and I do not fear either pain or death. What do you fear, lady? He asked. A cage, she said. I think this is wonderfully complex dialogue. I think Tolkien respects Aragorn's point of view, but I think he also fully understands and respects Éowyn's point of view, right? And understands what it is to be told, oh, do the honorable thing. The honorable thing is in the house, especially when what your society values is riding out to battle, right? Neither of these people is wrong. They are both right. They both have important things to say. Now, what does she do? Well, he ignores her and rides down the paths of the dead, and she ignores him and dresses up as Durnhelm, the Rohirrim warrior, and rides off to war. And by the way, the Rohirrim plan to leave Merry behind because a pony small enough for a hobbit to ride can't keep up with the long-legged horses of the Rohirrim. So Merry is told the same thing she is. Stay here and defend Edoras when the war finally gets here. She hears this and says, look, you can ride with me. He doesn't know who Éowyn is. He thinks it's Durnhelm the warrior. And that leads to one of the sort of just classic scenes in the book, which is the confrontation with the Lord of the Nazgûl. And I actually have to give you a little bit of a side here, because there's something that is there are a couple of interesting allusions that I think tell us something about the Nazgûl that we have not we have maybe not seen. So who are these guys, by the way? They are dead kings. They are kings of a realm that is gone, and a realm that was great and glorious, but ultimately became corrupted. And these kings in particular became corrupted and turned into ringwraiths. Now, and I don't mean this literally, because in some senses Middle-earth is literally to be taken as Earth. This I don't mean literally, but as a motif, as kind of a symbol. I think we're told what the land is that they come from, because Sauron is described when later, so the battle at Pelennor Fields is won, and the armies go and they're trying to provide a distraction to Sauron so Frodo and Sam can slip into Mount Doom, okay? And so they ride right to Moran in the front gate, and they have a conversation between Aragorn and the mouth of Sauron. And the armies of men and elves cry out, come forth, let the Lord of the Black Land come forth. Now, obviously, literally in this story, the Black Land is Mordor, right? But it turns out the Black Land is the name of at least one ancient kingdom on Earth, and that turns out to be Egypt. So the Egyptian name for Egypt is Kemet, which means the Black Land, and it refers to the black, alluvial, rich, good farming soil of the Nile, as opposed to Desheret, which is the red land, which means the desert to either side of the Nile, right? So Egypt is the Black Land. Sauron is the Lord of the Black Land. These are the ancient kings of the Black Land, where there's this fantastic fact that people wield spears, people wield bows, they wield swords and daggers, but uniquely, what the Lord of the Nazgûl fights with is a mace, a great black mace he wielded. We see that a couple of times, but we see that in this battle scene I'm about to read. Why does this matter? Because the Egyptian kings wielded a mace. If you look online, maybe we'll even put this image in here. You look at the Narmer palette, okay, which is Narmer is probably the first or a very early Egyptian pharaoh. Maybe he's the first one who united Upper and Lower Egypt, and it shows Narmer raising a mace over his head to crash enemies, and that's sort of forever after. That's the stereotypical image of the Egyptian pharaoh, the king, is crushing enemies, not with his sword, not with his bow or his spear, but with his hedge, with his mace. The Nazgûl are dead pharaohs. They are dead pharaohs. Literally, they are mummies. And by the way, fun fact: the first mummy film, starring Boris Karloff, was in 1932, 5 years before Tolkien started writing Lord of the Rings. He might literally have been thinking of mummies. All right, so we get Dernhelm, the young Rohirrim rider, and Merry, and Theoden gets killed. Theoden gets the Lord of the Nazgûl arrives and basically instantly kills Theoden. His horse falls on Theoden and crushes him. So in fact, later the Rohirrim memorialize Theoden's horse as his master's bane in like an inscription on a stone. So the king is down, and Merry is knocked down and shaken, and then he hears a voice: "Begone, foul Dwimmerlake, lord of Carrion, leave the dead in peace." Dwimmer is sorcery. Lake is probably something like a game or a toy. So, toy of sorcery. Maybe is a translation of the word. Leave the dead in peace. A cold voice answered, "Come not between the Nazgûl and his prey, or he will not slay thee in thy turn. He will bear thee away to the houses of lamentation, beyond all darkness, where thy flesh shall be devoured and thy shriveled mind be left naked to the lidless eye." We don't know what these houses of lamentation are, by the way. I don't think we have any other reference to them. But he threatens this loyal thane with endless torture. A sword rang as it was drawn. "Do what you will, but I will hinder it, if I may. Hinder me, thou fool. No living man may hinder me." And this is a prophecy we've heard before, that the Lord of the Nazgûl cannot be slain by any living man. Then Merry heard of all sounds in that hour the strangest. It seemed that Dernhelm laughed, and the clear voice was like the ring of steel. "But no living man am I. You look upon a woman. Éowyn am I, Éowyn's daughter. You stand between me and my lord and kin. Begone if you be not deathless, for living or dark undead, I will smite you if you touch him." And what happens, and this scene's in the movie, but I won't read the whole thing, although boy, I'm tempted to, is she and Merry together attack the Lord of the Nazgûl. Merry has his knife of Westerness that was taken out of the Barrow Downs when Tom Bombadil rescued him, and stabs the Nazgûl behind the knee, and she shoves her sword. He hasn't a visible head. Nevertheless, she shoves her sword where the invisible head would be, between his crown. She drove her sword between crown and mantle, as the great shoulders bowed before her. So he lurches forward, having been stabbed in the knee with not a magic sword, but a Númenórean sword, and then she stabs him in the head, and he collapses. Prophecy fulfilled. Again, this is the ending of a long story arc, and in the sort of classic tropes of prophecy stories, it's fulfilled, but not the way we expected, right? Because the true meaning of the prophecy was not that no one could kill him; it's that the people who killed him would not be men; they would be a hobbit and a woman. Now, I worry this is already running long, so I'm going to summarize Faramir's story, which then interweaves with Éowyn's. Faramir, we meet when Frodo, Gollum, and Sam are in Ithilien, and Faramir and his rangers capture the hobbits. They don't initially capture Gollum. Frodo helps them capture Gollum rather than have them kill him. Okay, and initially we get this interrogation where Faramir is sort of trying to figure out who Frodo is, and Frodo passes a series of tests by, and the words used are not password but tokens. He knows things that sort of prove he is who he says he is. He knows things about Boromir. He knows the line of poetry that sent Boromir up to Rivendell, about the line about the halfling dwelling in Imladris, or about Imladris and the halfling, Imladris being Rivendell. And also Frodo, Faramir asks him, was there anything in particular, any sign by which you recognize Boromir, anything he always had? And Frodo remembers his great battle horn that after Boromir betrays Frodo, he dies fighting to save Pippin and Merry. He's blowing that horn at the end, right? And these convince Faramir that Frodo is genuine, and to be trusted, and ultimately that he's on the mission, on the side of heaven, and on a mission, and should be allowed to go even with Gollum. But there's always a sort of a sadness and a sternness about Faramir, and we find out why that is when he gets back to Minas Tirith. And he's the very last man. He and his men are trying to hold the enemy at the bridge in Osgiliath. They're the very last. He is the last of the last. Prince Imrahil of Dol Amroth has to ride out and get him, and he comes back and he's badly wounded. And his father has only words of rejection for him. And his father basically says, it's tragic. Denethor says, if only Boromir were the one out there leading the defense. We need a strong captain. I wish that Boromir was still here. The wrong son died. Faramir even reminds him, I tried to go to Rivendell. You are the one who insisted Boromir go, right? And Denethor sort of implies that Faramir can only have his love or his respect if he goes back out and tries to retake the bridge, which he does, and he is almost killed. And then, as we said before, Denethor, this breaks Denethor's mind. He realizes what he's done. He feels the fever that Faramir has, and his mind converts this into the idea that he and Faramir must burn to death. Right? He douses them both in oil, tries to get his servants to light him on fire. Beregond saves Faramir. Denethor does manage to burn himself. So all these, again, these are not the main story, right? This is the texture of Return of the King. There's all these stories that are interweaving together. And I'm going to read one last passage. I'm way over time here. My producer over there is cracking a whip and pointing a gun at me, and I got to get on. But the result of this is that Éowyn, Shield Maiden of Rohan, and Faramir, the last son of the steward of Gondor, Denethor, are in the houses of healing together. They're in the hospital together. Aragorn comes and sort of using the healing powers of the king is ministering to everybody. But they have a few interactions, and Faramir falls for Éowyn, right? And by the way, this is man, to go back to like the kind of archetypal, the sort of myth analysis stuff, I think something people miss here is, if you think about Éowyn's story, she is a fairy tale prince. Okay, the land, Rohan, Edoras, are threatened. She undertakes to leave the land to to end the threat, right? She has to defy her own king, her own people's conventions to do this. She has a series of trials. She shows compassion to Mary. She fights the Nazgûl, right? This saves the land. She's a fairy tale prince. What is supposed to happen next? She's supposed to be given a reward, and the reward is a princess. And the fairy tale princess is Faramir, it turns out. Let me read this last bit here, and then I think wind up. Then Faramir came, so they're in the houses of healing, and sought her. And once more they stood on the walls together. They've kind of been meeting as they're both recovering. Those who are not wounded, Aragorn and Gandalf, are over at Morannon confronting the mouth of Sauron to distract him so Frodo can go to Mount Doom. He said to her, Éowyn, why do you tarry here and do not go to the rejoicing in Cormallen beyond Caer Andros where your brother awaits you? And she said, do you not know? But he answered, 2 reasons there may be, but which is true I do not know. And she said, I do not wish to play at riddles, speak plainer. Then and he's hoping that the reason is because she wants to stay with him because she loves him. But he's afraid the reason is Aragorn. Then if you will have it so, lady, he said, you do not go because only your brother called for you, and to look on the Lord Aragorn, Elendil's heir, in his triumph would now bring you no joy. Right? You wanted Aragorn to call you, but because only your brother is summoning you, you can't do it. Or because I do not go, this is what he hopes. That's what he fears. Here's what he hopes. Because I do not go, and you desire still to be near me. And then, because he's not an idiot, he says, and maybe for both those reasons. And you yourself cannot choose between them. Éowyn, do you not love me, or will you not? She says, I wished to be loved by another, but I desire no man's pity. Right? Again, this is sophisticated, right? I talk about fairy tale princes and princesses, but these are mature people, and this is a complicated situation. And she admits she was in love with Aragorn, and guess what? He kind of was too. That I know, he said, you desired to have the love of the Lord Aragorn because he was high and puissant, which is powerful, and you wished to have renown and glory and to be lifted far above the mean things that crawl on the earth. And he knows this because he wanted the same things. And as a great captain made to a young soldier, he seemed to you admirable, for so he is, a lord among men, the greatest that now is. But when he gave you only understanding and pity, then you desired to have nothing unless a brave death in battle. Look at me, Éowyn. And Éowyn looked at Faramir long and steadily, and Faramir said, do not scorn pity that is the gift of a gentle heart, Éowyn, but I do not offer you my pity. For you are a lady high and valiant, and have yourself won renown that shall not be forgotten. She killed the king of the Nazgûl. And you are a lady beautiful, I deem. This is one of the first things we know about her. Beyond even the words of the elven tongue to tell, and I love you. Once I pitied your sorrow, but now were you sorrowless, without fear or any lack, were you the blissful queen of Gondor, still I would love you. Éowyn, do you not love me? Then the heart of Éowyn changed, or else at last she understood it. And suddenly her winter passed, and the sun shone on her. I stand in Minas Anor, the tower of the sun, she said, and behold, the shadow has departed. I will be a shield maiden no longer, nor vie with the great riders, nor take joy only in the songs of slaying. I will be a healer, and love all things that grow and are not barren. And again she looked at Faramir. No longer do I desire to be a queen, she said. Then Faramir laughed. That is well, for I am not a king. Yet I will wed with the White Lady of Rohan if it be her will. And if she will, then let us cross the river, and in happier days let us dwell in fair Ithilien, and there make a garden. All things will grow with joy there, if the White Lady comes. Then must I leave my own people, man of Gondor, she said. And would you have your proud folk say of you, there goes the Lord who tamed a wild shield maiden of the north? Was there no woman of the race of Númenor to choose? I would, said Faramir, and he took her in his arms and kissed her. Look, the Lord of the Rings is way more complex than people give it credit for. It's beautifully knowing about human nature. It's telling dozens of stories, and they're all meaningful, and they all come to satisfying, moving ends here in this last book, The Return of the King. If you have not read The Lord of the Rings, if you only know it by the movies, I really hope you will go read the books. Well, I'm not quite done with it because The Lord of the Rings famously has an appendix. I'm going to read the appendix to The Lord of the Rings. Actually, it's a series of appendices, about 100 pages. And I am even going to, there has been a TV version, a streaming version of the appendices made. I'm going to go attempt to watch that. And we'll come back and talk one more time about that. So this has been High Lowbrow. I am Dave. Remember that the culture matters, and I want to have fun.